the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
Welcome to the Instructor Podcast Short Lessons. In these bite-sized episodes, I dive back into the archives and pull out a nugget of information or inspiration to get you thinking. Today, we are heading back again to March of 2022, as I'm joined by Tracey and Kev Field, who are talking about the way in which the industry has evolved to help and embrace pupils. Now, I've included a link to the full episode in the show notes, and I'd suggest you check it out, as it's a really interesting look into the different ways that we can help our learners. But just before you do, allow me to direct you towards the Instructor Podcast website, where you'll find all the previous episodes, a ton of free resources, and more details about the Instructor Premium membership, which currently has a 1-week trial that is completely free. So head over to www.theinstructorpodcast.com, but for now, enjoy this short lesson. I'm going to ask you a question, actually, which is good considering on a podcast. What's your view on driving instructors? As a whole, as an industry, what's your view?
You're sitting next to one.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, no, I'm quite happy to answer this question, because when we first looked at putting something together for ADIs and for nervous students, I was focusing solely on mindfulness. And so I went along with Kev to a conference, and I was doing a survey among ADIs about, mindfulness, would it be useful? What did they want? And the thing that I really came out from that conference with is being bowled over by how much ADIs really, really wanted to help their students. And so perhaps, there's sort of like, maybe if you ask a general member of the public what they might think about driving instructors, it will depend on their personal experience. So if they've had an amazing driving instructor themselves or for a family member, then they'll rave about them. And if they didn't have a good experience, they won't. But what I'd never thought about, and what really struck me, was how much ADIs really, or the ADIs that I spoke to and the ADIs that I've spoken to since, how much they really genuinely care about their students.
I like that answer. It's a good answer. So one thing you both spoke about there, like Kev, you mentioned like the NLP side, and Tracey, you spoke about mindfulness and stress management. I'd be interested on your thoughts on this, Kevin. How do you think the industry shifted in that sense? Because I've only been an instructor for about, it'll be 7 years this year, or 6 years, I lost count, either way. But I think back to when I learned 20 years ago, and I look at where it is now, and I see a shift. But again, I wasn't an instructor back at that time. So I just wonder, how much of a shift do you think you're seeing towards that side of it?
I think recently, yes. I think the last two, lockdowns helped. I think before lockdown, there was still some skepticism on coaching client-centered. When I was taught, it was, this is what you do. This is how you do it. Go and practice. Right, this is what you need to do better. Let's go and practice. So it was more telling. Now we're sort of like having this, I suppose, this agreement with each other, where you are working towards a goal for us both, where we want them to pass and be safe, but they also want to do it as well. So you have this agreement, which has never been in there before. And if I can say for myself, what I tend to do is I tend to step into their shoes a lot more now, rather than being it from just the driving instructor's point of view. Right, I am the god, I'm the expert of driver, and I know how to do it. I just listen to me and I'll do it. It's the old way. Whereas now what I do is I step into that student's shoes a lot more. And I think, okay, so what do I want to learn if I was that student? How can I best help those people? And I think that's what we tend to do as ADIs now, is we tend to coach, guide them as well to a certain extent. And I think that the initial client-centered learning, there was massive sort of like diversion with people. No, you can't. Yes, you can. And I think we're now sort of like tending to blend what we do now. And I think that's the biggest change I've seen in the last couple of years, with people wanting to learn more about how can I help my students more, but also how can I make my job easier? That's the one big thing I see with ADIs now is they're stressed. There's long waiting times. They've got to pass their standards checks. All of these things. They're a lot of stress. But if you can just help your student, because this is what it's all about, is how do I make that easier? And one of the techniques, that's why I got into the NLP, is because it's a fantastic tool to just be able to help them, help themselves. And I think that's what I want. I don't want to just be able to teach them to drive. I want to be able to help them with their A-levels or, exams that they got coming up, because it's the same sort of techniques, just phrased slightly differently. And that's what I'm going off on a tangent, but it's that sort of thing that I want to help them, but not just in the driving sense. Use the skills that I can teach to then go forward from there as well.
No, I like that. Do you find that a lot of students come back to you with that? So like you said, the stuff that you practice on lessons, they can apply to other stuff and they actually come back and say that my driving has now helped me with this.
Yeah, 100%, especially with, like I mentioned, A-levels. Mock tests is, they do mock tests at school, that some of them have just gone through it. And I said, okay, so how did you prepare for your mock test? How did you prepare for that hour beforehand? What did you do? And they said, we did that breathing stuff. They don't know what it's called, but we did that breathing stuff. And it's like, okay, so how are you going to go forward when you're driving or the next test that you have to do? But it worked really well because, I had a clear head. I knew what I was doing. So, that side of things, I think is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I will just ask sort of one more question around that, because I still see online, and I shouldn't go on as many of the Facebook groups as I do because it's very poisonous for the old brain, but I still see a lot of negativity and a lot of rejection towards client-centered learning and towards coaching. Yeah. Why, I suppose, two-part question, why do you think that is? And why do you believe that coaching and client-centered learning is actually the way forward?
I think as a human person or people, we don't like change. And when someone says you've got to change, we put up barriers. And I think that's enormously what's happened. People said, right, we're going to do this now. Yeah, but why? Because I'm doing this. I don't like change. I'm quite happy doing what I do. And then you get some of the other sided instructors going, okay, well, that's change, but I need to know more. I need to know why we're changing, or I need to know how I can improve me. So if this is what I've got to do and the change is coming, I'm going to step forward and actually embrace it.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.